Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Old School, New School. He's Jude Allume. I'm Wil Masisak. You can catch him at the Mr. Allume. That's Thee, Mr. Allume, Allume on Twitter. And I'm at Accidental Zen. But here we are now on this show, Old School, New School. And we're here to talk NFL football, specifically the free agency period. It's with us. A lot of stuff has been happening, Jude, and the New England Patriots appear to be trying to corner the market on free agents. What do you think about New England's pursuit of free agents this year?
New England's free agency move so far, if you're a Patriots fan, you got to be at least a little bit excited. They may not be cornering the free agency market, but they definitely cornered the tight end market when they got the top two free agent tight ends in this year's free agency class, and Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith, they gave a couple more dollars than I would have, considering I don't see that he's in kind of that top tier of tight ends with, the Travis Kelce's, the Darren Waller, the George Kittle. But he's definitely a great addition to their team. I feel like what they're trying to do is they're trying to go back to the New England Patriots of old. That's back in the day when they had Rob Gronkowski and they had Aaron Hernandez. Josh McDaniels, he loves the two tight end sets. And yet somehow last year they were dead last in the NFL in using two tight end sets. In addition to that, you've got a quarterback that you've just re-signed that you had last year in Cam Newton. His biggest knock since he came into the league, he often airs the ball a little bit high, so he needs those big receivers that can go up and get it, and they gave him exactly that in these two big tight ends. Think about when he was with the Panthers, and he had Greg Olsen, who was one of his favorite targets. Now he has those blanket favorite target tight ends that he loves to use so much. More than that, they even gave him a receiver, at least, in Nelson Aguilar. He's been a little shaky over the course of his career, but last year really went out and did some impressive things with the Oakland Raiders. He gets a shot with New England, more weapons for him, and I feel like they're going to go out and, spend some more money. This is new for the Patriots. They don't really tend to go out there and spend big. They're not dropping huge money on anybody, but they're acknowledging good guys that they feel would be a good fit in what they do on their team. And they're saying, you know what, we're going to spend the money. We've got it. They started the free agency period top 5 as far as cap room. And you know what? They used all of it. Bill Belichick saying, you know what, we're going to go a different route this year. We're not doing that 7-9 team anymore. I'm Bill Belichick. I'm going to cement my legacy. I'm going to make a winner out of Cam Newton and give him those weapons. That was what everyone was saying. The Patriots didn't have any weapons. Now they've got new receivers, 2 new tight ends. They're going to see what they can really get out of Cam Newton. So far, they've won free agency.
Can I talk now?
Yeah, go for it.
You stole my line about Bill Belichick's legacy. I think these moves are mostly about Bill Belichick's legacy. The New England Patriots spent 6 times this year what they normally spend in free agency in a given year. And I think this is a reaction to them having a losing record last year. And Bill Belichick, without Tom Brady, he's got to show that he can actually be the greatest coach of all time, even without the greatest quarterback of all time. So far in his career, it hasn't gone that well. He's about 12 or 15 games under 500 as a coach without Tom Brady. So, I think it's a last-ditch effort. Whether it works or not, we'll see. They still have some issues other places on the team besides tight end. And Nelson Aguilar, I'm not sure that really moves the needle for me, for them. But Cam is going to throw high. If he's got bigger receivers, he'll just throw higher.
I didn't get to go into all of the moves they made. They also went out and they helped that defense get a little bit better too. They went out and they signed Matthew Judon, a great pass rusher. Who's the guy from Miami that they let go and they're bringing back? Kyle Van Noy. Thank you very much. New England has this habit of letting guys go, and then they don't play as well on that other team wherever they end up, but then they come back to New England, and it's almost like they go right back to being a Pro Bowler, as good as they were when they left New England. I anticipate that's going to be the case here. They went out and got Henry Anderson, maybe a low under-the-radar move that not as many people are going to be looking at, but he was a great asset for the New York Jets last year. Like, they're making moves all around. Let's not forget they went out and got Jalen Mills from Philly as well. They're making moves all over the roster, and they still have a pretty good draft spot. I think more moves are coming for the Patriots. I'm telling you right now, if they don't win at least 10 games, I'd be shocked.
Yeah, I mean, they're making improvements. I still don't know for sure they're a 10-win team. Jalen Mills, I've heard Philadelphia, beat reporters say that if Jalen Mills is anything other than the fifth defensive back on your team, you're in trouble. So we'll see. There's still some names out there. I mean, and they have $16 million of cap space. Maybe they'll sign a couple of more. But yeah, I mean, they make the big splash. It's so rare. I know that last year the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were the team that made the big splash in the offseason, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl. But it's a lot rarer than you'd think for a team to make big noise in free agency in the beginning the free agent period, and then actually back it up with a winning record. You build all these dream teams. I remember the Philadelphia Eagles, like 10 years ago, building this team that was supposed to be unbeatable, and I think they imploded by about the fifth week of the season. So to me, it comes down to how well can Cam Newton actually perform? Because if he's not it, I don't know. Are they going to now trade up all their picks and bring in a young one of these young quarterbacks in the draft? It remains to be seen what they're actually going to do at quarterback. But if it's dependent upon Cam Newton, I'm not sure he's really shown much the last couple of years in terms of winning football.
Well, at the very least, he's going to get at least 1 year to prove that he's still got some juice left in the tank. One thing's for sure, he's not short at all on his belief in his ability. And to be fair, the guy did win an MVP in the National Football League. Wasn't that long ago. I can't believe that his talent has deteriorated that much in that short an amount of time. I think there is some truth to him not having that many pieces last season. He's got the pieces now. This is definitely a prove-it type year for Cam Newton. Like, if he doesn't make it happen this year, then he may need to start reducing some of that confidence he has in himself and go towards more like, maybe I should be a mentor, a backup figure for another younger up-and-coming quarterback, as much as he says he doesn't want to be in that position, but that may be the route to go. But only time will tell. I'm personally rooting for him. I hope he makes it happen, even though I never want to see the Patriots lose. I never want to see the Patriots win. I'd still like to see Cam Newton succeed.
No, I think Cam Newton's a good guy. Like, I root for him as well. I think when he hurt his throwing shoulder, he's not been the same since then. That season, he went from being an MVP candidate with an undefeated team to not being able to really complete a pass and having to basically get out of go to IR a couple of weeks later, and he's never really been 100% since then. So we shall see. Some other teams made signings, believe it or not. Not too many. But what'd you make of the Trent Williams or some of the other deals that went down?
My favorite signing so far was William Jackson. I mean, this is a guy, one of the top corners in the NFL. He doesn't get as much recognition, or he's not talked about as much as some of the other better cornerbacks in the NFL, but he's definitely up there. Like, this guy has amazing skills. But my favorite part is they signed him for not a ton of money. They signed him for a deal like James Bradbury got last season, about $14 million, I believe he's going to get, which is great because this is truly a lockdown, shutdown corner. You can leave him on the best receiver on the other team, and that guy's going to have a hard time getting open, just like Bradbury. Bradbury got a deal for about $14 million, probably could have got more money, but for whatever reason, he only got the $14 million from the Giants, and he had like an all-pro caliber type season for the New York Giants, and William Jackson is definitely as good, if not better. So he's signing for the same amount of money. He's going to go out there and do what he's consistently been doing and be one of the better corners in all of the National Football League. And you get it at a team-friendly price, so that's just going to help that team be able to sign more players and make that team better. That's my favorite signing so far. How about you?
Well, first of all, I think the Washington football team is on to something. That's where William Jackson went. Jackson was one of my favorite corners. He was like my sleeper corner for a while there coming out in the draft. Got injured that first year, which sort of dropped him off the radar a little bit. But he can definitely cover. He's got length. He's a nice corner to have on the outside. He's had some issues, like with tackling and his willingness to like do anything else other than cover guys. But you can still make a lot of money in the league doing that. But I thought Washington's other signing, Curtis Samuel, the other signing that the Washington football team had, I really like that one. He goes to a team that has, Terry McLaurin and, sub 4.4 Antonio Gibson, and now Curtis Samuel is the fastest guy on that team. They've now got some speed and some options, nice toys to play with on offense. If they ever get the quarterback situation totally situated there, I could see them. I mean, right now, I'm sure they're the favorite in that division, even if Ryan Fitzpatrick is their starter. So I really like what they did. Yeah, William Jackson, apparently that's the knock on him, that he was very physical in college, but for some reason not as physical in run support and so on in the NFL. But maybe when you're playing for Cincinnati, it reduces your desire to stick your nose in, tackle in the slot.
No point in getting hurt for a losing record, How about a team that's like not doing a lot or made some moves that you just completely don't agree with? I'm
not really sure. I mean, I'm not super into what the Patriots have done. I like the idea of that they're spending money and trying, but they, like Aguilar, and for that matter, Hunter Henry as a sort of inline tight end that you're going to depend on to block and things that New England usually requires of their tight ends. I'm not sure I love that fit really for either one. But I understand they're trying. At this point, they have the money and they're trying to go out. They're going to go out and try to do stuff. But I wonder about that one. You questioned what they're going to pay Jonnu Smith, but I think Jonnu Smith is about the best H-back in the league right now. It's that inline tight end spot that, Hunter Henry got the same money, and I don't see that being nearly equivalent to what the best guys can do. He's not Travis Kelce to make up for his, decent blocking, and he's not blocking like Gronkowski to make up for the fact that he isn't, the speediest or most mobile receiver. So I feel like he's kind of an in-betweener.
So if the Patriots haven't won free agency, who's winning free agency right now?
It's like I feel like nobody wins free agency. The players, the Players Association, that's who wins free agency, because the prices this year have gotten driven up so far. Like those Patriots deals, they're like 20% above market value for those guys that they decided they really wanted them. And even in a cap shrunk year, they decided that they really wanted to go and get them. But I don't know. Like I feel like that, other than maybe the edge rushers that have signed that didn't, kind of get to the expectations. I'm thinking of Shaquille Barrett re-signing with Tampa Bay for probably $5 million a year less than he would have gotten on the open market. That kind of team-friendly deal definitely hasn't helped very much. But so maybe I'll say Tampa Bay with what they've done in the offseason so far with Godwin and working on getting Gronkowski back and getting Shaquille Barrett re-signed on the cheap. It helps whenever your players think you have a great shot to win the Super Bowl again, to get them at deals. That's for sure.
I'll tell you this much. I don't like what the Steelers are doing. Steelers lost a lot of key pieces, and they seem content on not doing anything to replace any of them.
Well, okay, but in fairness, they do their replacing before free agency. So they lost Bud Dupree. In last year's draft, they drafted Alex Highsmith to basically replace him, which he did when Dupree went out anyway. They lost the slot corner, but they replaced him with Cam Sutton from in-house. They lost a nose tackle. They were already sort of planning on platooning Carlos Davis and Isaiah Buggs. Now, I'm not saying they're equivalent to Tyson Alualu at his age, this stage of his career. But here's the thing: they will fill all the spots that are empty with journeyman guys or young guys as replacements, and then they'll go in the draft and they'll draft those positions. And when they come out, like I think you can't judge any team's off season until you've gone all the way through the draft and into camp. And it's like who they really starting the season with is a much better gauge of what that team is. And Pittsburgh never, ever, 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 ever participates in the early stages of free agency. They don't believe in spending that extra money. They're into value buys. So they'll swoop in. So, next week they'll pick at the guys who went through, the free agent process, have talked to a lot of teams and haven't really gotten very good offers. And they'll go to one of those guys and say, hey, we'll give you a real opportunity to play. And even though we're not paying what you thought you were going to get, we'll give you a good deal and we'll make it, we'll structure it so that if you play well, you'll make more. And then they'll wait till after it doesn't count against compensatory picks anymore. And they'll swoop in and get, a couple of guys that have been released late or released in camp. And before you know it, they'll be back. This is what they do every year. every year, and it somehow works out for them. They've been very, very rarely caught with their pants down when the season starts.
For me, it's just they were a couple pieces away from being a true title contender. So for me, it's like you want to keep what you have and maybe add one or two more pieces just to kind of push you over that hump. But all I'm seeing is a lot of talent going out the door and nothing coming in. Like, I hear what you're saying, but it's a lot of ifs. It's a lot of variables in that equation. We're going to draft somebody. We're going to pick up somebody who hasn't been signed already. We're going to develop the talent that we already have. That's not saying for sure that, these guys are going to step in and be studs for these guys who were studs for us that have walked out the door. So it's like you're taking a huge chance when you have a team that's kind of built to go the distance right now, because you've got one or two more seasons. Well, really stretching it with two. You've got one more season with Ben Roethlisberger. Right. You're already down. You're starting running back, your top wide receiver. But on the defensive side of the ball is really where I'm just kind of confused.
Here's the thing. I don't think they lost anything on offense that isn't either replaceable at the same value or perhaps even upgradable. The offensive line guys that they lost were either at the end or underperforming. So that doesn't bother me. Juju is a great receiver. Still remains to be seen if he'll be back or not. But, right now receiver is about the most fungible thing there is in the NFL. To get another guy that can come in and play big slot is not that hard to do, whether it's cheap free agent or in the draft or both. The defensive guys, losing Bud Dupree, you're not going to be able to replace a guy like that without a high draft pick. But I also think that they got a guy that is at least a solid starter to replace him. So that doesn't frighten me as much.
I really like Mike Hinton. I think that's going to be more of a loss than you realize. That's a really good.
Mike Hilton does a lot of stuff. I'm just saying that I feel like that's exactly the kind of stuff that Cam Sutton does, and I think Hilton was poisoned by that. I mean, he wanted to negotiate. He was already starting when he was an extended rights free agent and then a restricted free agent, and the Steelers refused to negotiate either time and signed him to a longer term deal. And I think when they did it the second time or third time to him, I think that he was starting and for 3 years getting paid next to nothing in NFL terms. And when they made that decision with him, I think he was going to take whatever offer he could get, because the money that he took from Cincinnati it would not have been undoable to sign him. I just don't think he wanted to come back. And I do think he does a lot of stuff that allows them to do things because he's so physical. I also think he's not the greatest in coverage and made a lot of name for himself as a pass rusher and player against the run. So I don't know. I think you might be able to put a guy in there who's not as good at that stuff, but who is better in coverage. You might even out in the end. We'll see. I'm a huge Steelers fan. I never panic at this stage of the year because they've proven this to me so many times. We've lost better players than Bud Dupree and Mike Hilton, and still managed to have a good year. So it may not be that they have quite the team they had last year, but maybe physically, if their defense is 80 or 90% of what it was, and their running game is twice as good, I think they have a chance to be better overall than they were last year. And that's what they think too.
They for sure lost better players, but I don't think they've lost as many good players at one time as they have.
I mean, you missed the 90s, man. You missed the 90s, Brad. And that time we lost guys off the defense like every year, who somebody who was an all-pro or a significant contributor. I think they've been planning this Bud Dupree loss for a while. They knew he was going to be gone. So even when they franchised him last year, I think they were thinking ahead to what they might do. They were definitely not as good after Bud Dupree got hurt as they were before that. But I feel like when they had the opportunity to take a step forward on offense, you can't have everything. You can't have this amazing defense that stays together forever in the NFL. And if you're going to lose somebody key without having a significant backup, like Cam Sutton to Mike Hilton, not the big drop-off. Highsmith for Dupree, a little bit of a drop-off, but still not crazy. But it's not like going to nobody. So I don't know, I have a feeling that by the time it's all said and done, instead of being a top 3 defense in the NFL, there'll be a top 10 defense and a much harder schedule this year. So we'll see how that all shakes out. I'm not positive that even if they had exactly the same team this year, that they would have the same kind of result just because their schedule is crazy. One of the hardest in the league. And that's all I have to say about that.
What about who's left? Who hasn't been signed yet that's kind of like a surprise for you?
I mean, the wide receivers in general, I feel like the market has been kind of soft. Kenny Golladay and the aforementioned Juju Smith-Schuster, the two names in particular. Antonio Brown also still looking for a deal. It's looked like he could play a little bit last year. I don't know. I guess probably the most surprising to me that isn't signed yet is, maybe like a guy like Eric Fisher. I would think that Eric Fisher would have a strong market, and offensive linemen always seem to be out there. Right. And even though he hasn't been on the market that long, you have to think somebody would be prepared to bring that guy in. There's so many teams in need of offensive line help. How about you?
I like what you said as far as the wide receivers. I feel like at least a little bit what's contributing to, the lack of signings of the names at the top of the list is just, this is a draft class that's very deep at receiver. So a lot of guys might want to see what happens in the draft first before they're ready to dedicate or commit a big amount of money to a receiver such as Kenny Golladay or Juju Smith-Schuster. As far as who's left, I want to say corner because I feel like that's the other position that's like you always want to have at least one really good corner. But Richard Sherman is probably the best guy out there. At the same time, I don't think he's definitely not the cornerback that you're going to go out and bring the Brinks truck for anymore. But at the same time, he's at that stage of his career where he's just so knowledgeable and he's going to help mentor whatever defensive backfield that he's there with. I feel like there are a lot of teams that can use his skill set, that can have him around just to better the group overall. And I feel like eventually somebody's going to sign him in the very near future.
I thought maybe he got to just today that he made a deal. I thought that I read that. Where was Jack Jenkins playing? Is that
Tennessee?
Tennessee, I think. Released Jenkins or at some point let him go and sign Sherman.
No. That's New Orleans. Jenkins was playing, but he signed with Tennessee.
Oh, he signed with Tennessee. New Orleans traded out Jenkins for Richard Sherman. That's what I think.
I don't think so. At least I haven't seen that yet. I'm hoping I'm not.
Because they were talking about the downgrade from how big a downgrade is to go from Jack Rabbit to Richard Sherman. But we're here, I might as well. Gonna have to editing mayhem anyway.
Looking at it now, it doesn't look like he's signed.
Yeah, okay. Might have just been they're talking, which doesn't mean anything really.
It's your Twitter.
No, this is my Twitter. I'm on the regular news here. Let's see.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just it's a rumor, but it isn't confirmed yet. Okay, so I'll just jump in with something else. Yeah, and I mean, speaking of corners, Xavier Rhodes is still on the market, and I know Xavier Rhodes has some issues. Had an up and down season, but still feel like you said, everybody needs corners. And if you're going to sign Jalen Mills, I mean, I take Xavier Rhodes every day over Jalen Mills.
Xavier Rhodes, a guy, I want to say 3 seasons ago, he looked like he was primed to be in that conversation of best cornerbacks in the league. A trying recent couple of seasons, but there's always a coach out there who feels like they can untap that potential. So that is definitely a surprise that someone isn't willing to take that chance on him so far.
Yeah, and I think the other wave that has yet to come are the sort of the leftover edge rushers. I don't think there's that many edge rushers available anymore. And a lot of them signed with their original teams. They didn't get away into free agency. So if you were looking for a free agent edge rusher, your Clowney and Alden Smith, and I'm not even sure who else is still on the street in that regard, but I know that there'll be a market for those guys in this secondary free agency, so I expect those to come by. And then the running backs, there's tons of running backs.
I was just going to say, yeah.
And
lots of running backs right now.
Right, there's so many running backs, in fact, that I think the price will be pretty cheap. I mean, they'll be driven down on those guys. Mm-hmm. So I kind of expect a market that's really soft for running backs, but eventually they will, some of them at least will get signed. Phil Lindsay from Denver, now on the street, is a guy that
Chris Carson.
Yeah, Chris Carson. I think out of what's left, like I would take Chris Carson in a minute. I think he's a terrific player. His injury history is really the only knock on him. Otherwise, he's a complete 3-down back, good in the pass game. Been really solid for Seattle when he's been on the field. Big part of their success, and when he's not in there, big part of the reason that they're not as successful.
I mean, running back just, it stopped a little bit, but it looks like it's going back to that trend where that's just a position that's devalued and, they're seen as a dime a dozen and people are just unwilling to spend the big money on it because also what's happening is every time you give a running back big money, they just don't seem to be worth it. With two examples who are free agents right now, who are coming off of big money contracts, and Todd Gurley and Le'Veon Bell. They got their big money contracts after putting in the years where they were just the top of the top in that position group. Yep. Now they're just sitting there with, I haven't heard their names at all. But just like you mentioned, Chris Carson, that's a name I'm surprised. Not so much from free agency, but just because I thought eventually the Seahawks would have worked something out so they can bring him back because right now they're without him. And they also lost Carlos Hyde. And what they have left, I forget his name, not Procise, not Travis Homer either. I'm remembering all their running backs except the one that's in mine. But the point being, they don't really have a main guy to go to that's going to serve the role that Chris Carson was serving. And he was very pivotal to that offense. So I'm not sure what it is that's holding them back. I mean, they are a little bit strapped for cash and they do have a lot of other holes to fill, but I feel like I don't know what kind of money Chris Carson was demanding, but I feel like they could have found some sort of way to make it work. And it's just a shock to me that they haven't done so as of yet.
I mean, I kind of feel like Seattle is not necessarily admitting it, but I think they're in the rebuild mode. At least in serious reload mode, just because
they're like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, Yeah,
I know, but that's the thing. You can't. A lot of teams have this problem, especially when you have a franchise quarterback. You don't want to make it completely bare, but I just feel like you don't pay contract 2 or 3 to an expensive running back when you think it's going to be a couple of years before you really have a contender. Because by the time that you're a contender, your running back that you paid is now making way too much money and needs to be replaced anyway. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them draft a running back. I mean, it's going to be a tough year for Seattle because they're one of those teams that really depends on spark, and these the analytics about how guys test. And they're not going to have a lot of great information this year, not as much data. That's going to make it hard for Seattle to do these things where they reach for a guy who's really athletic. They're going to be going by, like everyone else does, looking at their tape and saying, does this guy look athletic or not? So it could be hard for them to do a rebuild this year in a year with a lot of data uncertainty.
I mean, just as much as they need to do it, they're still very much trying to win now. Just like you said, they've got Russell Wilson. They were not looking to deal him. I don't think it was ever really a possibility. They got offered a king's ransom, 3 first-round picks, a third-round picks, a couple players in addition, and they still said no. And I guess they just feel like when you turn down an offer like that, it's like, man, I think we can still win right now, and I just don't see it happening. So I'm just curious to see what direction they're really going to try and go in, really build through the draft. But, I mean, what are you doing? Just let me know what you're doing. Let me get some sort of idea,
Do you remember a couple of weeks ago on the show, I was talking about Kobe Bryant bought that big diamond ring. We were talking about Deshaun Watson. So for Russell Wilson, turning down 3 1s, a third, and a couple of players is Seattle's way of buying him a giant diamond ring to say, we still love you. That to me is, they wouldn't be surprised if they're the ones that leaked that, potential trade just so that they can say
absolutely. I mean, at the very least, Russell Wilson's got to feel pretty good. Like, man, they could have changed this entire franchise around, but they said no to keep me. Gotta love that, right? Any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's it's still really, really early in the situation with Deshaun Watson, but there have been allegations now. It was one random allegation that seemed really out of character, and now we've got 4 lawsuits going. And I feel like it's I mean, having having experienced this through a fan's eyes with a quarterback accused of things that never came to charges or fruition, really, it's really hard to make an assumption about anything involving somebody's guilt, but it feels like at the minimum, it's totally screwed the situation for the Texans and Deshaun Watson to try to make a move or try to do something different. And it's, I'm sure there are teams out there that have a bunch of cap space that haven't done anything in free agency because they're thinking, like, I wonder if we can get Deshaun Watson. I wonder if we can get him. Who wouldn't be dissuaded by anything that Deshaun Watson did? Because that's the way NFL teams operate. They will say, oh, we vetted carefully his character and we're sure that he's, a good person and we're not worried about any of this stuff, and they would sign him. And deal with the consequences later. But man, what a hard thing, not only for him to deal with, but for just the not knowing. It's going to be a while before it gets sorted out. And this will hang over him and the franchise like a big, giant black cloud, as if they didn't have enough big, giant black clouds hanging over the Houston Texans franchise.
Right. I'll finish with, just want to give a little shout out to the Jacksonville Jaguars. As you mentioned it before, one of the worst record over the last 4 years in the NFL. And you know what? They look like they're making some good free agency moves. Besides the Patriots, they're probably the most active team. They went out and got Philip Dorsett. They signed Carlos Hyde. He's going to be a good complementary piece to James Robinson. They got Marvin Jones as well. He's been great, under the radar, great receiver the last couple of years with the Detroit Lions. And it looks like they're kind of formulating a nice team that'll have a lot of deep threats, which is what Trevor Lawrence likes to do. So it looks like things are going in the right direction for the Jaguars. I'm interested to see how all of their free agency moves pans out, in addition to this number one pick that they're holding on to.
Well, and I was going to say,
not only got a ton of money to play with.
Not only free agency, have they done well in free agency, smart free agency, but also have the number one pick. I think they have more picks than anybody in the draft. I want to say they have 12 or 13 picks. So Jacksonville is in a pretty good situation if they don't mess it up. Also,
that's a big if.
Pressure. We'll talk about this, I'm sure, as we get progress further into the season. But Trevor Lawrence is going to have some sort of low-key pressure on him because they're going to build this team around him that's going to look pretty set. And if he doesn't immediately, if he's not immediately successful at the NFL level, the questions are going to start early. So let's hope for his sake that, he performs like he did in college.
That pressure was going to be there regardless. In today's NFL, there's no learning curve anymore. We're putting you in week one. We expect you to perform. Week one, we don't care that you're a rookie. We're paying you big money. Perform for that money.
Get out there and do it. And speaking of get out there and do it. I guess that's all the time we have this week for the show. Jude Allume Wil Masisak here for Old School, New School, saying thanks for tuning in. Please hit the subscribe or like button, whether you're listening on a podcast app or seeing us online on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. Just hit that like and subscribe button. That helps us out and helps other people find the show. In the meantime, Jude, buckle up for week number 2 of free agency, and we'll talk to you next week on Old School, New School. Peace.